we'll be swapping chairs.
Terrific. Thank you for
Thank
this
you,
note.
Chair.
All right. Airservices Australia, do you wish to make an opening statement?
No, Senator.
Thank you. We're going straight to Senator Patrick.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to go to aircraft movements. The objective of my question to understand how we determine the health of GA. So I presume you keep a track of lots of this data. Do you feed it to as a beta? Or there's a bureau that looks at aircraft statistics.
It depends on what the statistics are, Senator. So we would collect all the information in regards to air traffic movements that would be picked up by our air traffic system, which is stored. Some of that data is supplied to BITRE, but other comes from airlines, etc. It just depends on what their data source is.
Bureau of...
I think it's Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Economics.
Okay. So are you saying that your statistics would be around only RPT flights?
All air traffic that we manage.
Okay, so out of Whyalla Airport, which has not got air services there, but might be managed by Brisbane or Adelaide or somewhere, Melbourne or something?
Melbourne would do the en route airspace around, so anything that we would, if it's instrument flight rules flights, we would definitely have that information. If it's visual flight rules type aircraft, unless that they are carrying a transponder and they paint on our system, they don't necessarily have to talk to us because they're in what we would call Class G airspace or non-controlled airspace.
Sure. So they just make a call as they get to the runway, let everyone know that they're about to enter the runway and they take off and do something. Is that how
Correct.
it works? So how do we get a good measure of GA traffic? So actually I'll come back. Of the statistics that you keep, do you break them into say GA, international travel, RPT, and so forth?
Yes, we do, Senator.
Is there any possibility on notice that you could give the GA statistics that you have for the last, say, 4 or 5 years, just the total number of movements?
We can provide you a breakdown of movements, which we would classify general aviation as generally as aircraft maximum takeoff weight below 5,700 kilos is a general rule, and we can provide that data.
And obviously it'd be a commercial pilot if it's GA as opposed to a private pilot, which is not necessarily my concern here.
No, it would be anything that's 5,700 kilos or less.
All right. What I'm trying to do is understand over the last 5 years the total number of movements and perhaps also by state as well, if that's possible.
We can give a by location.
Yeah, okay, that would be helpful on notice. In your annual report, you've advised that you received government assistance to support industry. How much did you receive and how was that used to help industry?
I'll pass to Mr Logan to give you the exact breakdown, but in rough orders of magnitude, it was about 250 million for financial year 20. We received the equivalent of $1.1 billion for last financial year, FY21. However, $550 million of that was to be portioned into this financial year. And that is was to help assist us in the fact that because we are industry funded, with the reduction in air traffic and particularly the airline industry, we lost 80% of our revenue as a result. And so that assisted through both the...
Well, you said 56 in the annual report, 56% decline in revenue.
Yeah, that was for last financial year, but the immediate drop that we saw in March 20 was about 80%, and then it sort of came back.
Don't tell me you applied for JobKeeper.
We're not eligible for JobKeeper, Senator, because we're a government-owned entity.
I understood that, but many people applied for it and then actually did okay. So that 56% decline in revenue over the year. So when it's characterised as $1.1 billion to support industry, that's not actually the case. It's $1.1 billion to support Airservices in the absence of your normal revenue stream. Ostensibly,
yes, and I'll get Mr. Logan to provide a little bit more detail. Senator, our normal annual revenue is around probably about $1.1 billion a year. With the reduction that we saw because of the airline industry pays for about 90% of our revenue. Yet we have to provide our services 24/7, 365, whether there's one aircraft flying or 1,000, and regardless of the fact that the airline industry, particularly no international traffic or minimal international traffic, the reductions that we saw in domestic regular public transport, we still saw quite heavy loads in general aviation. We saw Western Australia, for example, the fly-in, fly-out traffic continued. Intrastate traffic in Queensland was still 70% of what we saw pre-COVID. So we actually had a traffic and in a report, even though our normal pre-COVID levels would have been about 4 million to 4.5 million, we were still handling about 3 million air traffic movements over the last 12 months. Yet 56% of our revenue dissipated.
So I'm not being critical of the fact that you needed to be supported through a period where you weren't generating the normal revenue you do through, I presume, not landing fees, but it's the air traffic per mile or something, isn't it?
Yeah, an honorary charge, terminal charge, and our aviation rescue firefighting charge.
It's just really the characterisation that this was, in a sense, government assistance to industry, because in effect it's not. It's government assistance to Airservices.
A portion of it was, but a portion was through domestic wavering of our fees. Yeah. Which was the support to industry in the fact that the government paid their fees to us. Can you provide a breakdown of how much of
of that money, how much fee waiver you gave, if you could provide that on notice? All right. So I think that's all I really wanted. I'm just curious about these the GA numbers. So anything you can provide me more information rather than less, if you have a concern about something you might give us. Be grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Patrick. So you're clear on what that question on notice is?
Yes, we are, Senator.
Right, terrific. Thank you. All right, Senator Wish-Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Very well. Thank you.
Right, thank you. In 2016, Airservices commenced a preliminary site investigation for PFAS contamination across the Launceston Airport to better understand potential impacts from the previous use of these legacy foams. And this included a sampling project of the airport. I understand in that sampling program, PFAS was detected in groundwater, both on the airport and also off the airport. You say in your website, Airservices will now be undertaking further investigations in the form of a detailed site investigation, DSI. Airservices will continue to work with the relevant Commonwealth and state environmental regulators and health authorities and the airport as part of a risk-based approach to responsibly manage PFAS at Launceston Airport. So my first question is, when will Airservices release the findings of their recently completed sampling programming, including their off-site sampling of Launceston Airport and neighbouring properties?
Senator, we've completed recently what we would call the targeted investigation, the DSI, as you described. We are currently in liaising with the landholders, the private landholders around the airport, and also working with the regulators at this stage in working through those issues and those results with the landowners. We've offered to a number of local MPs some information and some further briefing on where we are at with that, and we're just working with the...
When did you do that? Could you just give me the details of those briefings?
No, we haven't provided the briefing. We've offered a briefing, Senator. I think that we wrote to you at the end of September, offering you a briefing on the Launceston.
And who else have you offered briefings to?
Can I take that on notice on the rest of the people that we've offered briefings to, Senator?
Would it be the other MPs and other senators in the area?
The relevant MPs, yes.
Okay. And have you engaged with any community groups to explain your plan to stop PFAS from leaving their lease sites?
Not at this stage, other than the landowners surrounding the airport that we're currently talking with the regulators. Okay,
which landowners are they?
Can I take that on notice? It's the ones surrounding the airport.
Okay. So what specific actions has Airservices taken to stop the ongoing flow of PFAS from their leases onto the land surrounding the airport, including the land of those landowners you spoke to?
Senator...
what did you tell them? What did you tell them about what remediation work you were doing?
Senator, I have to take that one on notice. I just don't have that information to me at hand so that I can actually provide you the correct details.
So you can't tell me what actions you're taking in relation to stopping the ongoing flow of PFAS from your leases?
Senator,
it's a pretty fundamental question.
I understand that, Senator. As I said, that we've just completed the targeted investigation, and in conjunction with the regulator, the Tasmanian EPA, we are talking with the relevant landowners about those results. I don't have them with me, but that's where we're at.
Okay, so that's about the results from your sampling. What about what you're going to do to stop the PFAS from going onto the land?
That's based on...
results are obviously, you can't manage what you don't monitor, so you're establishing the database and the results. How are you going to manage it?
Senator, I don't have that information with me.
Why don't you have that information with you? It's an absolutely critical to this issue.
I understand that, Senator, but I just don't have that with me as we speak.
Is it because you don't actually know how you're going to manage this site at the moment?
Senator, I just do not have that information with me at the moment, and I do not have the relevant experts with me. So I can take it on notice,
right.
Please.
Well, can you tell me when can the local community, including those landowners, expect Airservices to stop the PFAS from leaving your lease sites?
Senator, I don't have
what kind of time frame can we expect to get that sort of information from you?
I would, based on the fact that we are talking with the surrounding landowners, with the Tasmanian EPA, I would say that it will be in the near future.
Do you have any concern? Well, near future, can you be a bit more precise about that?
Senator Whish-Wilson, we've just lost sound. Can you check your settings and...
Is that better? Is that better,
perfect,
Chair?
you're back, yes, thank you.
Yeah, I was just saying, you started your sampling programs 5 years ago. What does the near future mean exactly?
Senator, I'm talking months rather than anything longer. I just don't have that process in front of me, and all we've done is we've started talking as a result of the targeting investigation. As you mentioned at the start, we did a preliminary investigation. We found contamination in the groundwater, which then meant that we had to go do the targeting or the detailed site investigation. We now have those results, and now we're consulting with the relevant landowners in conjunction with the Tasmanian EPA on those results. I don't have them with me, and due to some legality...
Could you tell me what you're consulting exactly? I mean,
what
does the results mean in the context of your consultations?
On the results...
Surely landowners are going to want to know how you're going to manage this.
Yes, and I'm not part of those discussions with the landowners. I understand that we are now consulting them and working through those results with them.
Can you tell us how many people and landholders are affected by this ongoing pollution issue of waterways and soil from your lease sites at Launceston Airport?
Senator, I have to take that on notice. I don't have that exact information with me.
I first discovered this issue a few years ago when I took my dog down to the local dog park at the North Esk River, and there were signs from the local council saying not to let your dog swim in the water or eat the fish, and they actually had a skull and crossbones. What are you doing to ensure the local community can eat fish from the North Esk River?
Senator, I am unaware that the contamination or that we are talking about has entered the Esk River, and so I'm just reluctant to commit to that without knowing what the results are personally.
I understand that, but I can tell you it's genuine. The signs were put there by the council and was reported on in the local newspaper, the Examiner. So I can send you those links, or you could have a look at it for yourself. I understand Launceston Airport has applied for federal funding for the $138 million fund that was set up to deal with remediation of PFAS. Where are you at with your current legal dispute with Launceston Airport on this issue at the moment?
Currently, Senator, we are in mediation.
You're in what, sorry?
Mediation.
Mediation. So why did Launceston Airport take legal action against Airservices Australia?
Senator, currently they're taking action as a result of the environmental management plan for the airport, and now we're actually working out what it is that they would like in their environmental management plan, and that's what we're in mediation to determine what that is.
Why would they take you to court to work out what it is in the plan?
That is a good question.
Is this because you dragged your feet and you didn't do anything to assist in the remediation of PFAS from your lease sites?
Not at all, Senator, and that is the reason why we're in mediation, to determine exactly what they would like in the plan and why they would like it in the plan when the plan that we have submitted meets the requirements.
Sorry, I understand it's good that you're in mediation, but what's your understanding as to why they initiated this legal action against Airservices Australia?
Senator, as I just mentioned, that is the question that we're actually asking them. And the fact is that we're in mediation to determine exactly what they are and why they are wanting to do that. Okay, well,
what processes were prior to the legal case? I mean, surely you don't just take someone to court. There must have been some ongoing cooperation or collaboration between your organisation and Launceston Airport prior to this, discussions around remediation and solutions?
Yes, there was ongoing discussion, Senator, but I'd have to take it on notice for the exact reasons.
The exact reasons as to why it went to court?
Why Launceston decided to take legal action.
Okay. Well, have you taken any, apart from the sampling program that started 5 years ago, have you taken any other... Look, okay, I'll be more specific. You do say in your... on your website and your information sheet for Launceston Airport that you'll be responsibly, a risk-based approach to responsibly managing PFAS at the airport. And you say you focus on identifying practical remediation and containment solutions. Where applicable, successful research and development projects will be implemented at Launceston Airport. Have you get any indication of what that might be, or can you put some detail around that for us tonight? I mean, you have other airports that you're working at. There's been a big process around PFAS around the country at defence establishments. What do you mean exactly by you're focused on identifying practical remediation and containment solutions?
I'll use another example in Tasmania, in Hobart, where we manage the wastewater from the fire station and our training grounds, and we put it into pond, and then we have a research and development project where we clean the water. And that's one of the measures that we've taken based around identifying what the issue is, which we do through our preliminary site investigation, and then if there's information that comes from there, we do a detailed site investigation. Because as you mentioned before, once you know when you've actually got what's the size of your problem and then how can you either remediate it or treat it. And that's why we go through the testing program or the characterisation work to know what is the problem that we have to deal with. And Hobart is a prime example where we've done that. We're now in the process with Launceston of just determining what the issue is that we need to resolve, and that's what we're in the consultation with the surrounding landowners. Once we do that and working with the EPA, we will then move to what is the correct measures to either remediate or contain or do something to clean. So that's the work that we're doing currently at this moment in time.
So how long did it take you to get from an ATA on Hobart Airport? How long did that process take before you took action?
Oh, Senator, I have to take that on notice because I just can't recall.
Right. Is there any other examples you can give us of practical research or development projects you've implemented at airports?
I can take that on.
And also, could I also ask, with the Hobart project, did they apply for any of that federal funding?
I am unaware with the Hobart whether they've applied for any funding. That's a matter for the department. The issue with Hobart, that's been in place for a couple of years, so it was pre that anyway.
Right. So just to be clear, then you have no, in terms of how that 138 million is spent around the country. I understand it was set up for the kind of purpose we're discussing. What role does Airservices play in the allocation of that funds? Are you consulted, or do you have a direct say in how that money's spent, or particularly how projects are prioritised?
Senator, that's a matter for the department. The department will consult us to ensure that we're not doubling up on the efforts that we are doing in the sense of the testing that we're doing on the airport rather than what the entire airport will do. So the testing that we do in an airport is usually restricted to our own leased areas around our fire training grounds and our fire stations. We don't get broad access to the entire airport.
Okay. Could in terms of the tests you've done so far, the soil samples and the water testing, how does Launceston Airport rank compared to other airports you've tested? It's been put to me that it's probably the fourth most contaminated airport in the country.
Senator,
do you agree with that?
Senator, I would be ill-speaking because I'm uninformed of that without having the results and compare it to the other airports. So we can take that on notice.
If you could take that on notice, thank you. And in terms of future liabilities, the unusual thing about, you're probably aware about Launceston Airport, is it is up on a plateau. The airport literally is right on the edge, so the water runs off, goes down into farmlands, goes down into a river that's right there. There's vineyards, there's a whole range of different things. What kind of assessment work does Airservices do on future liability around PFAS contamination issues?
Senator, at this stage, what we do is we determine what the issue is around our lease sites and our responsibility. As you may be aware, is that we are not the only polluter or the user of PFAS. It's not just firefighting foams. On a particular airport, there are the fire suppression systems in hangars, for example, contain PFAS, as you saw a couple of years ago with the leak in the hangar in Brisbane, for example, the Qantas hangar. Fuel farms have PFAS associated with it. So, and one of the things that we are quite conscious of, and we have said publicly many times, is that we take responsibility for the PFAS, but we can't take responsibility for all PFAS because we're not the pollutant, and the fact that we are funded by the airline industry is that we can't take on other people's liabilities. So we're quite focused on our particular issues and making sure that that is being remediated or contained and not...
Understand. Understand, that's very reasonable, but it does say very, very clearly in your information sheets, you weren't surprised when you found contaminated soil sample or water levels because of the history of your areas. So
Correct.
you've been very clear to acknowledge that your area is part of the
Yep.
part of the problem. Could I ask when will you be releasing that data, the DSI, the detailed site investigation data? You said you shared it with local landowners. When will you be making that public?
It goes back to the near future piece, Senator. That process needs to work through, and it will be done in conjunction with the Tasmanian EPA.
Okay. I am genuinely intrigued why you would share it with local landowners first, rather than make it public at the same time and declare your strategy. What's the logic behind sharing it with local landowners first? I mean, especially if they have no background or education or awareness on the PFAS issue.
Senator, just in broad terms, is that in gaining access to their sites to do the testing, to work it through, there are legalities of and their liabilities that we just need to work through. So once that's satisfied, then we will share the results.
Sorry, their liabilities, do you mean your liabilities to them?
Yes, but also the fact is that we're working on private land and getting access to their land to do testing.
Oh, right. Okay.
So we just got to work through those issues, and once that issue's done, and that's why we're working with the EPA, and then we get to a certain thing, and then we'll be able to share the results.
I see. So you when you go onto their land to do the testing, it's a requirement that you share the results with them, or that is part of a contractual arrangement.
We need to make those arrangements to get access to their land.
Okay, but would it be fair to say that it would be difficult for you to put that in context with them without providing some kind of comparison or benchmarks with, for example, safety standards or water drinking standards, that kind of thing? Is the Tasmanian EPA assisting you with that?
That's correct, and that's why we're working with the Tasmanian EPA in even doing the consultation with the landowners. So we're not doing it by ourselves, we're doing it with the EPA and in conjunction with the authorities.
Okay, and you're saying the public release of this should be some months away?
I just don't know where that process is fully at, and it will be based on discussion with the Tasmanian EPA.
Okay. Has there been any discussion with local government authorities? I understand the Launceston City Council is a part owner of the Launceston Airport, and obviously they're also responsible at local government level for water quality and water pollution issues. Have you had any discussion with them at all?
Not to my knowledge, but I would assume that would be occurring.
As a major stakeholder, thank you. The last question for me is, in terms of your briefings of other stakeholders, you mentioned other MPs. Could you take on notice whether you've had a direct meeting with the local MP, Bridget Archer, our federal representative for Bass, or whether she's sought a meeting with you directly around this issue?
I'll take that on notice, Senator, because I'm unaware.
All right, thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. Senator Sheldon.
Good, thank you very much. And good to see you, Mr Harfield. We just want to go to this question. We raised at the last estimates meeting hearing that there'd been a final decision for a proposed relocation of 65 air traffic control jobs from Sydney to Melbourne, and that you were going to come up with a final decision at some point. Has there been any final decisions, and where are we up to?
We have made a final decision that we've decided to relocate the services in Sydney to be provided from Melbourne, and that will occur over the next few years.
So Civil Air last month said there was just 15 of the 65 considering making the relocation. Is that correct?
Most likely, yes, Senator.
We've also heard earlier today about a dramatic shortage of skilled labour, and I'm talking about ground handling in aviation, that's upon us due to inadequate government support. So how are you going to find 50 skilled and experienced air traffic controllers?
Senator, through a range of the trainees that we are bringing through over the next few years, as well as some of the movement that we're getting in regards to some of the operational changes that we are making in the operation, which will free some staff up, particularly in Melbourne, to train, and transfers from other areas around the place, because we're putting expressions of interest to people that would like to end up doing Sydney Terminal Control Unit from Melbourne, and during that time they may go to Sydney for a period of time to bring it to Melbourne. There are a variety of different ways that we can do that.
Thank you. Look, I just want to go to then questions raised about concerns over the effect of this change. The Civil Air President, which is a union, Tom McRobert, said trainees tend to operate cautiously, prioritising safety over noise reduction, and that they might not be as good at keeping the aircraft exactly on the current flight paths. Went on further to say the move to Melbourne will amplify these issues because there will be training so many more people and for such a long time. Instead of having a trainee on 2 or 3 months a year, you'll probably see a trainee on every shift. It means operational uncertainty, which can increase noise or cause the flight paths to change slightly. Have you heard those comments?
I have.
And what's your response to those?
Senator, my response is twofold. The first is one of the things that we did in taking the consultation when we went out around this discussion was originally we were going to do it in 18 months to 2 years. And based on that, some of the comments that Mr McRobert has mentioned are valid, that we would have to increase the training and put it in. But one of the changes that we made is that we will do it over the next 3 to 4 years, which stretches out that training time that's required and not overloading and having every shift with the trainee, as he has alluded to. The second point that I would make is about the fact that when somebody is training, it's like when you're starting to drive a car, is that when you're learning, you've got a permit to learn, but you have a training officer that's in there that is fully licensed. And that training officer will be making sure that the trainee is working to the exact standard that is required. That's why they have a training officer. To sit there and make a comment that there would be increased noise or it wouldn't be, then the person is either the training officer is not doing their job, which I have every confidence that they would, and secondly is that if they can't do it within the normal competencies that are required, they wouldn't be checked out by the check controller to allow them to operate. So, or yes, they're not exactly the same as somebody that's been doing it for 10 years, but it is within the main safety and efficiency for them to be able to operate.
So there's... I'm just trying to understand the scenario, how it would be operating. You've got the trainers, you've got the trainee. They are for the entire shift together, one-on-one.
Absolutely.
And for the shift that they're on one-on-one, as the person progresses, not with necessarily that much experience, but that for the air traffic controllers that we've lost or appear we'll lose from this important safety requirements for aviation. What's the impact on those trainees when they're actually sitting there and having to when they will be making some decisions as they go along? When there has to be some effect, on those decisions if they're not experienced. There has to be some questions of, what's been raised by Mr McRobert having some validity, isn't there?
So, if you just indulge me, I'll take you through the life cycle of a trainee. Before a trainee goes what we would call on the job. Now, these are trainees that are not straight out of the school, that come off the street. These are already experienced controllers that have been doing controlling on other positions. Before they go on the job training with the training instructor, they will do time in the simulator. And they've got to come up to a certain standard in the simulator before they go on the job. When they're on the job, they have to be at a certain standard and continue to improve. And during that time, they will do what we will call a progress check to make sure that they are progressing right. And then they can't go, I'll call it solo, until they get checked out that they can meet all the competencies and are all viable. During that time, they have a training officer, and it's usually the same training officer all the way through. Sometimes that doesn't happen, but generally speaking, it's the same training officer all the way through. And during that time, the training officer has to step in if the trainee is going outside those particular bounds, because the trainee is actually operating on the licence of the training officer. And if something goes wrong, it's the training officer that actually has the error associated with them. So there are a lot of controls around allowing even somebody to hop on the console. They've got to meet certain standards, and then during that time, they are monitored constantly. Are they as efficient, totally efficient as a seasoned veteran when they first check out? No, they're not. But they are still at a level that is acceptable for them to be solo, so to speak. So it is not to the extreme that Mr. Roberts makes out.
So
Senator Sheldon, just letting you know, I've got 2 minutes till the break, and I'm hoping you might be able to finish your questions then.
I should be able to do it fairly
Terrific.
quickly, but it won't be very much over if I am.
Okay, thank you.
Just the, you mentioned that when trainees become then formally qualified to operate by themselves, that there'll be some inefficiencies there. When they obviously they don't have the same experience as somebody who's been doing it for 10 years, for example, or certainly so many that do it longer. Is that, how do they compare with somebody who's been there 10 years?
So there's 2 comparisons I'll make. There is a comparison of a position that it's the first, what we would call rating or endorsement of somebody that's an ab initio trainee, that sort of, I'll call it, come off the street, come through the college, and it's their very first rating. There is also a difference from what we would call an experienced controller that has worked maybe 10 years on other positions that then goes on to that position for the first time. They would be more efficient, for a better term, than somebody that came off the street. And some of them will be just as experienced and just as efficient as somebody that's been on that console for 10 years because their other prior experiences would. Okay. So there is a difference between an experienced controller getting the endorsement there versus somebody that's come off the street and getting their very first endorsement.
Thank you, that's helpful. Is the 50, the shortfall of 50, are they 50 people off the street, or what percentage is?
No, they'll be all experienced controllers.
Okay. I just want to go to this other question of, just final question, that is that redundancy. You mentioned that our last hearing that there's people taking redundancy. Is that, where's that up to?
Sorry, the redundancy of?
I think I understand there was about an order of about 20 people that were seeking redundancy. Is that correct?
Probably in the Sydney TCU or the Sydney Terminal Control Unit. Yes, there will probably be in the order of, but their redundancies would be phased over the time that when we would release them, and we'd have the trainees to do it at the other in Melbourne.
Good, thanks, Mr. Harfield. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Sheldon. That completes Airservices for the evening. Please go with the committee's thanks. With everyone's indulgence, we're going to keep rolling and